Every emotional wound you buried is not gone. It's writing your future in silence. What you repress today is already coding tomorrow. That discomfort you keep rationalizing, that memory you never speak of, that anger you swallow with a smile, they didn't disappear. They became code, invisible lines of programming shaping what you attract, how you react, and even the people you repeat. Maybe you've noticed this, the same patterns, the same types of relationships, the same exact feeling, showing up in a new face, a new place, but with the same ache in your chest. It's not bad luck. It's not coincidence. It's not the universe punishing you. It's your shadow, the part of you you were told not to feel, not to show, not to be. Imagine this. A child hides her tears because crying gets punished. She grows up smiling through pain, earning love by pleasing others. Years pass. Her body ages, her clothes change, her friends change, but her patterns don't. She keeps giving too much. She keeps breaking at the same emotional seams. She's no longer a child, but the shadow of that child is still making choices. And now, I'll ask you something uncomfortable, because this entire video is meant to confront what's real, not what's convenient. How much of your life is truly yours, and how much is still coded by the parts of you you've repressed? What if that anxiety isn't random? That pain in your chest has meaning? That fatigue you carry is the weight of decades of denied emotion? Right now we'll open a doorway, not a mystical one, a neurological, psychological, and energetic one. One that Carl Jung spent a lifetime mapping. One that Peter Levine traced through the nervous system. One that Gabor Maté illuminated with compassion and clinical clarity. And one that you'll begin to feel in your own memories, your own body, your own story, if you keep watching. Because the shadow is not your enemy. But until you face it, it is your author. And it's writing the next chapter of your life with code you never consciously chose. Let's decode it. Together. A shadow that you repress is coding your life. And the reason it has so much power is simple. You don't even realize it's there. That's the paradox of the shadow. It isn't dark because it's evil. It's dark because it's hidden. Carl Jung called it the unconscious twin, the version of you that you pushed away in order to survive, to belong, to be loved. But pushing it away doesn't mean it vanished. It just went underground, into your dreams, into your reactions, into the way you speak to yourself when no one's listening, into the fears you can't explain, the sudden anger that feels disproportionate, the shame that arrives without a clear cause. That's your shadow speaking. Most people think shadow work is about facing your dark side, but it's deeper than that. It's not about morality, it's about memory, stored emotion, forbidden expression, Think of it like this. Your shadow is a part of your internal operating system, like a hidden app running in the background, quietly draining your energy, redirecting your path, and filtering how you see the world. When you were a child, there were moments too big for you to process. Maybe you felt unsafe, maybe you were told to be quiet when you wanted to scream, maybe you needed affection and received absence. And so your system, brilliant, adaptive, learned to suppress. It learned to cut pieces of yourself off, just to keep you functional. That's not weakness, that's survival. But survival has a cost, because what was once a necessary adaptation becomes an unconscious script. You think you're choosing, but you're repeating. You think you're healing, but you're avoiding. You tell yourself you've moved on, but the body keeps records, and the shadow keeps writing. This is why the same themes echo through your life. Why no matter how much you achieve, there's a quiet emptiness. Why you can't fully relax in moments of peace. The shadow isn't just an emotional concept. It's a neurological imprint, a loop, a code, wired into your brain's default mode network, into your body's autonomic memory, into the very stories you tell about who you are. So let's pause, gently. Can you remember a moment, even recently, when you felt like you overreacted, or shut down completely, or said yes when every part of you wanted to say no? That was a glimpse of your shadow in action. This isn't meant to blame, it's meant to reveal. Because when you begin to recognize the shadow, you begin to reclaim authorship. You begin to see the roots beneath the surface. You begin to feel the stored charge in your body. And slowly, you start to create space between who you've been and who you are becoming. Because if what's unconscious can be made conscious, the story can change, the repetition can stop, and your future can finally be written from presence, not protection. You may not remember the exact moment it started, but your body does, and so does your shadow. The truth is, trauma doesn't always arrive with drama. Sometimes it arrives with silence, with the absence of being seen, with a look that made you feel like too much, or not enough. That's why trauma isn't what happened. It's what happened inside you, as Gabor Maté says. It's the split that occurred when your nervous system decided, this is too much to feel, I'll store it for later. But that later never came. Never. And so, without knowing it, you've been carrying those moments in your fascia, in your breath, in your heart rate, in the way your stomach tightens before certain conversations, or how your chest collapses when someone raises their voice. What was once an experience became a pattern, a loop, a code. Imagine your life like a film. Trauma is the frame that gets frozen. Everything else keeps playing. But that one moment keeps glitching, repeating, resurfacing in disguise. You meet someone new, and suddenly an old fear returns. You change your environment, but your triggers follow you like echoes. That's not coincidence, that's code. That code lives not just in your memories, but in your present moment perceptions, in how you interpret tone, posture, energy. Your system is constantly scanning. Is it safe? Is it familiar? Is it dangerous? And here's the paradox. Familiarity often feels safer than freedom. So even if something is painful, if it's familiar, your nervous system might choose it again. That's how trauma codes your future. That's how emotional wounds write behavioral scripts. Maybe you've lived this. You walk away from one toxic relationship only to find yourself in another. You set boundaries, only to let them blur again. You try to change your habits, but the pull of the old pain feels stronger than your willpower. That's not weakness. That's biology. Your system is looping. And it will keep looping, not because it wants to punish you, but because it's trying to resolve what was never completed, what was never felt, what was never integrated. Peter Levine calls this the unfinished survival response. Your body was prepared to fight, to flee, to cry, to scream, to run, but it froze, it numbed, it obeyed, and the energy got stuck, encapsulated in time, not in the past, but right now, in you. This is why trauma is not just emotional, it's temporal. It distorts your relationship with time. You think you've moved on, but your physiology hasn't, and until it completes the loop, it will keep recreating situations that resemble the original wound, hoping, unconsciously, that this time you'll resolve it. But healing doesn't come from replaying. Healing comes from recognizing the loop and stepping out of it. Which raises the next question. Why do we repeat these patterns? And how does the brain get stuck in them? You've probably asked yourself at some point, why do I keep ending up in the same situations? Different faces, different places, but somehow the same pain, the same argument, the same ending. Why? Because trauma doesn't just create memories, it creates loops. And those loops live in your nervous system like grooves in a vinyl record, replaying the same song, until something interrupts the rhythm. Here's what most people don't know. Your brain isn't designed to make you happy. It's designed to keep you alive. And to do that, it prioritizes what it already knows, that not what's best for you, but what's familiar. Even if what's familiar is pain. The reason for that lies in the way trauma impacts the reticular activating system, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex, the orchestra of perception, memory, fear, and logic. Once trauma enters this system, it starts overriding new experiences through old filters. So when something reminds your body of the past, a sound, a smell, a look, even a posture, your brain doesn't ask, is this true now? It just reacts as if the danger never ended. That's why you might lash out at someone who didn't mean harm, or shut down when someone gets close. Your reactions feel irrational, but they're actually precise responses from a brain trapped in a loop. It's not about willpower, it's about wiring. And here's where it gets deeper. The quantum field, yes, even physics agrees, reflects that energy back to you, like attracts like. So if your body is emitting a frequency of fear, abandonment, or unworthiness, the field doesn't judge. It simply responds. It mirrors what you carry. This is what some call the matrix. But let's be clear, this matrix isn't a sci-fi simulation. It's a perceptual reality coded by emotion, memory, and meaning. The trauma loop is the glitch. And until it's consciously rewritten, you're stuck in a simulation made from the past, projected onto the present. So you try affirmations, visualizations, goals. But if your nervous system still believes the world isn't safe, or love is dangerous, or expression leads to pain, your body will override your mind every time. Because the mind says, I want change. But the body says, we remember what happened last time. And it's the body that wins. This is why breaking the loop doesn't start with thinking your way out. It begins with feeling your way through, with presence, with gentle confrontation. With recognizing this isn't bad luck, this is a loop waiting to be healed. So the question is, where does this loop live? Not just in thought, but in flesh, in fascia, in breath. In the places where your body still thinks it's yesterday. Your body doesn't lie. It remembers what the mind tries to forget. Every startle, every freeze, every breath you held in childhood is still living somewhere beneath your skin, in your shoulders, in your belly, in your jaw. That's where the loop hides now. Not in memory, but in muscle. Peter Levine taught us something radical. Trauma is not in the event. It's in the unfinished response. It's what your body couldn't complete when the threat arrived. You couldn't run, you couldn't scream, you couldn't fight back. So your biology hit pause, but that pause never ended, and now you live in it. That's why when someone raises their voice, your throat tightens. When a door slams, your stomach knots. When love gets too close, your body pulls away. Not because you choose it, but because your body still thinks it's there. Still in the room, still in danger. This is not imagination, it's physiology. Robert Sapolsky, in Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, explains how animals release trauma. A zebra escapes the lion and then shakes, breathes, completes the survival cycle, and it's done. The threat is over. The body resets. But humans, we stay trapped, not in cages but in thought, in guilt, in silence, in shame. Our survival response never finishes. It loops. This is why you can be in a safe room met with a calm person, in a quiet moment, and still feel your chest race, your breathing tighten, your skin crawl. That's your body saying, we haven't left yet. And here's where the quantum perspective becomes hauntingly accurate. The body is a time machine. If you never fully left the trauma, your cells still think it's now. This is what somatic therapists call trauma time. The past isn't behind you. It's beneath you, inside you. That's why traditional talk therapy doesn't always reach the core, because language lives in the prefrontal cortex, and trauma lives in the brainstem. You can explain the pain 1,000 times, and still feel it when someone touches your lower back. That's why the healing doesn't begin in words. It begins in awareness, in sensation, in breath, in placing a hand over the heart and whispering, I hear you, in letting the body finally speak and finally finish what it couldn't back then. You are not broken, you are unfinished, and the body, loyal as it is, has been waiting for you to come back, to feel, to stay, to hold space. Because the trauma didn't happen in the mind, and it happened in your whole being, so the healing must come through your whole being too. Now ask yourself, what happens when you stop repressing all of this? What is the cost of keeping it down? What you repress doesn't disappear, it mutates, and eventually it knocks on the door as something else. Chronic anxiety, unexplained fatigue, digestive pain, migraines, autoimmune issues, insomnia, depression, emotional shutdown. You see, the body is incredibly loyal. If it can't express, it stores. If it can't cry, it tightens. If it can't scream, it inflames. Repressed emotion is never just gone. It becomes something physical, tangible, sometimes unbearable. That's why so many people go from doctor to doctor without answers. The test results say normal, but your body says otherwise. Because what you're carrying isn't in your blood, it's in your story. Gabor Maté, after decades of treating patients with autoimmune and chronic illnesses, discovered one unifying thread: the repression of emotion, especially in childhood. Children who had to be good, quiet, pleasing. Children who had to suppress anger to stay safe. Children who had to numb themselves to survive. Those children become adults who get sick. It's not psychological weakness, it's biology. When you suppress emotion, your body enters a state of constant dysregulation. Cortisol levels spike and never quite settle. Inflammation becomes chronic. The vagus nerve, which calms your nervous system, stays dormant. And slowly, cell by cell, your health pays the price. Imagine holding a beach ball underwater for hours. That's what emotional repression feels like. You spend so much energy holding it down, keeping it out of sight. But eventually, your arms tire, and it bursts back up, often violently and often at the worst time. An argument you didn't expect, a breakdown you can't explain, a shutdown in the middle of joy, or worse, a slow burn of disconnection from others, from purpose, from yourself. And here's the paradox. We repress to stay in control, but in doing so we lose control of our health, our reactions, our reality. You can't heal what you refuse to feel. And feeling is not weakness, it's the beginning of restoration. When you allow grief, anger, fear to rise, to move, to be acknowledged, you give the body a chance to complete what it began years ago. You stop pushing the beach ball under, and instead, you let it float. You make peace with the waves. But this requires something radical. Seeing your shadow not as an enemy, but as a messenger. Because what if your pain wasn't here to punish you, but to point the way back to yourself? What if the shadow you feared your whole life is actually your most honest self? What if all those exiled feelings, the anger, the jealousy, the fear, the grief, are not flaws to be fixed, but fragments of your wholeness waiting to be returned? Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not by chasing light, but by integrating the dark. The shadow is not the villain of your story. It's the part of you that holds everything you were told to hide. Your instincts, your needs, your voice, your power, your fire. And here's the paradox. The more you repress it, the more it controls you. But the moment you turn toward it, not with fear but with curiosity, it softens. It shows its true face. And what once looked like a monster becomes a mirror. You begin to see. The anger was protecting a boundary that was crossed. The jealousy was pointing toward a desire you abandoned. The fear was guarding a wound too long ignored. The grief was a love that had nowhere else to go. This is the sacred function of the shadow. It reveals what is unmet, unloved, unseen, and calls you back. And the moment you meet it, you begin to write a new script. Because make no mistake, your shadow is coding your life. But when seen, felt, and integrated, it doesn't need to sabotage anymore. It becomes your ally, your compass, your flame. This is why so many people fear healing, not because they don't want to be free, but because freedom requires contact with what they were taught to reject. It's why we resist the silence, the stillness, the mirror, because deep down, we know what waits there. But the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Inside your shadow lives your wildness, your creativity, your sensuality, your discernment, your hunger for truth, your voice that no longer whispers. The part of you that says, "This is who I am, and I don't apologize for it." You don't need to fix yourself. You were never broken. You were just divided, scattered across time, trapped in loops, buried in protection. But now, the fragments are calling home. You are not becoming someone new. You're remembering who you were before you had to forget. And what waits beyond that remembering? A new kind of reality, one that no longer runs on old emotional code, but on presence, choice, vision. But to get there, you must step out of the simulation you were born into. What if your trauma isn't just in your body, but in your field? What if the past you've tried to forget is still spinning, not in memory, but in probability, pulling you into loops that feel like fate. Trauma is not just a wound, it's a recording, a frequency. It bends your perception of time. It distorts the information your nervous system receives. And it shapes the hologram you live inside, again and again like a movie stuck on repeat. Stanislav Grof once said, "The psyche is structured more like a hologram than a linear narrative." What this means is that your unconscious doesn't file events in a straight timeline. It holds experiences as layered imprints, emotional snapshots frozen in the field, echoing like signals. Until you meet them, they meet you. Over and over. You think you're choosing new people, new careers, new cities. But really, you're just rearranging the furniture in the same house of unhealed emotion. Carl Jung, one of the fathers of the holographic brain model, proposed that your memories, beliefs, and identity are not stored locally, but as interference patterns across a multi-dimensional field. That's why talk therapy alone often doesn't resolve trauma, because the root isn't just cognitive, it's encoded. You're not broken, you're running a script. And if trauma codes experience, then healing can recode it. This is not fantasy, it's neuroplasticity, epigenetics, information field theory. When you begin to observe your patterns, not with judgment, but with presence, you start to disrupt the field. You collapse the wave. You change the probability of what comes next. Your emotions are not just feelings, they are frequencies. They attract realities that match their code. And every suppressed emotion has a charge, an unresolved narrative that pulls in more of itself. That's why the same types of people appear, the same arguments, the same heartbreaks, the same disappointments. You're not cursed, you're coded, but codes can be rewritten. And this is where presence becomes the great disruptor, when you no longer react from the old emotion, when you no longer follow the script of fear, shame, abandonment, you introduce something radical into the field: choice. In that moment, your future no longer belongs to your past. This is why trauma healing is not only personal, it's quantum, it's timeline repair, it's field recalibration, it's the collapse of false identity and the resurrection of essence. Because beneath every traumatic imprint is a version of you untouched by pain, unfragmented, whole, waiting. And every time you choose awareness over reaction, softness over defense, truth over silence, you meet that version. Not in a dream. In your now. Healing is not an event. It's not a breakthrough that happens in a flash of light or at the end of a long meditation. It's a return, a re-inhabiting of your own body, a quiet revolution that begins when you stop running from your pain and start listening to it. But here's what no one tells you. Healing often feels harder than being wounded, because survival was automatic. It was the program. It was the known. Healing is the unknown. It asks you to feel what you were never allowed to feel, to grieve what was never mourned, to face what was once unbearable, and stay. And in that staying, the code begins to shift. Gabor Maté says that trauma is not what happened to you, but the disconnection it caused, from yourself, from your truth, from your body. So the path to liberation isn't fixing, it's reconnecting, and that path often begins with the smallest steps. Pause, breathe, notice. The way your chest tightens when you're criticized, the way your stomach drops when you're left on red, the way your jaw clenches when someone raises their voice. These aren't random reactions. They are echoes of a nervous system that learned to protect you, patterns that once saved you, but now sabotage you. And every time you notice them, truly notice, without judgment or rush, you interrupt the program. You teach your body a new language, safety. You teach your mind a new truth, presence. And slowly, the loop unravels. This is not glamorous work, it's often invisible. It's crying alone in your car, it's saying no when your voice shakes. It's choosing to feel instead of scroll. It's choosing to stay instead of run. But each time you do, you reclaim a fragment of yourself. Piece by piece, you return home. And one day, crackles without fanfare, you notice something extraordinary. The people you attract are different. The way you respond to stress is different. The emotions that used to control you now pass like waves. That's not coincidence, that's freedom. And not because you've escaped the shadow, but because you integrated it. because you learned to walk with it, because you understood that your symptoms were messages, not malfunctions, that your pain was a portal, that your nervous system wasn't broken. It was brilliant. It adapted to protect you. And now it's learning that it's safe to live again. This is liberation. Not perfection. Not constant peace, but presence, your ability to stay and with yourself, with your truth, with your body, even when it trembles, even when it remembers, even when it rewrites. A shadow that you repress is coding your life, not as punishment, but as invitation. An encrypted message from the self you once abandoned, asking to be felt, seen, heard, reclaimed. It's not the darkness that destroys us. It's the refusal to face it, to speak to it, to sit with it long enough that it no longer whispers threats, but reveals its wisdom. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But now, fate is no longer running the script. You are. Because you've seen the loop, you've traced the code, you've dared to enter the cave you feared, and in doing so, you found not a monster, but a mirror, not an enemy, but a message, not death, but rebirth. Your trauma was never your identity. It was your initiation. It shaped you, yes, but it does not define you. Because now you know the secret, that healing is not a destination. It's a return to authorship, a sacred rebellion against programming, a quiet rewriting of the lines you were handed. You are not here to repeat the pain of your past. You are here to transcend it, to become the conscious coder of the next chapter. So here is your call. Don't run from your shadow. Walk toward it. Name it. Befriend it. Let it speak. Because once you do, it loses its power over you and becomes the power within you. Your body will remember. Your field will shift. Your future will change. You are not a prisoner of your past. You are the architect of what comes next. Now take the pen back and write something only your healed self could ever imagine. If this resonated with you, subscribe to Walk with Others Decoding Their Shadows and leave a comment below. Your voice may be the mirror someone else was waiting to find.